Okay, I think you all heard the bells, so it's 2 o'clock, which means I think we should start with that final part of your day and the beginning of the wider Marie Curie celebrations. As I mentioned this morning, today is a very special day, 7th of November 2017, which marks the 150th birth anniversary of Marie Sklodowska Curie, as well as the 20th anniversary of the Marie Sklodowska Curie Actions. And both the researcher as well as the funding mechanism from the European Union have achieved very remarkable things, which we would like to celebrate today with all of you here and also elsewhere. Before I start with my presentation, which is going to tell you something about the impact that these things had here on the University of Liverpool, I'm very happy that I can share with you a video which was provided to us by the European Union, in particular by the Director General of the research part of the European Union, addressing particularly you guys here.
Hello everybody. Let me start by telling you a short story about Marie Sklodowska Curie, whose birthday we celebrate today. Once upon a time, 150 years ago, a baby girl was born in Warsaw, in the then Kingdom of Poland, at the time part of the Russian Empire. Her name was Maria Salomea Sklodowska. Most of us know of her today as Marie Curie, a brilliant Nobel laureate who lived and worked in Paris. But who was Marie Sklodowska Curie? How did she fit in her world? The world during Maria's time was going through very rapid changes. At the time of her birth, there was no electricity, no anesthesia, no airplanes, no cars, and life expectancies was around 40 years. Empires collapsed and disappeared through wars and revolutions. And the natural science was set to go through their most incredible travel of discovery ever. But more than anything else, Maria's world was a man's world. Girls were mostly kept uneducated. The doors to the temples of science, where Maria was determined to live, were almost hermetically shut for women who were considered by society in general as being by nature less able than men in everything, and especially in science. In such a world where there was absolutely no reason to assume that Maria, or any other Maria of her time, would be able to achieve anything significant, certainly not in the difficult world of natural science, in which the exposure of every error or weakness in anyone's work is a way of life. But by the time this girl reached the age of 44, she could look at most scientists fairly as lesser achievers. She had discovered and isolated polonium and radium. She had discovered radioactivity. She had won 2 Nobel Prizes. And she was the first woman to be awarded a Nobel Prize at the age of 37. She was invited and welcomed to the company of the greatest physicists, such as Einstein and Planck. She was in love with knowledge in an altruistic way. She invented image technology to photograph the interior of the human body, and she went and applied this invention at her own expense to save wounded soldiers. She refused to patent her isolation method in order to allow other scientists to work freely with it. Every age, every society has its heroic examples serving as models of what human beings can and should strive to be. They set the bar very high for most of us, but at the same time serve as moral compasses and source of inspiration. Marie Sklodowska Curie, despite being a woman in a man's world, fulfilled the heroic requirement. We are celebrating the 150th anniversary of her birth, and she has deservedly and in a positive way achieved the only kind of immortality possible for humans, to be remembered with admiration. Let me now turn very briefly to the Marie Sklodowska Curie Action. It is a program which financially supports researchers in doing the research they choose to do, asking them 2 things. One, to be excellent in their research and to do in another country. Thus, we help them collaborate and learn from each other and also gain from the experience of living and working in and with different cultures, like Marie Curie did. The Marie Sklodowska Curie Actions are different to almost all research support programs anywhere because they allow the researchers to choose what they do instead of asking them to do what their financial supporters want them to do. That's why we remain loyal to the spirit of Marie Curie. We do not discriminate in any form or shape, and certainly not against women. In this sense, our track record is exemplary. In general, only 30% of researchers are women. For our program, they are about 40. The beneficiaries, more than 100,000 by now, are becoming the builders of a European identity by working abroad and experiencing the cultural diversity of Europe as a Marie Sklodowska Curie Fellow. I will leave you to continue with the celebrations by expressing our gratitude towards CERN, the University of Liverpool, and the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich for organizing this birthday party, and my feeling of hope that the next generation of researchers and European citizens is being incubated with the help of the Marie Curie Sklodowska Actions. Have a great day. Thank you.
Yeah, we had a lot of these celebrations already today from the time we start the day here in Liverpool with all the hands-on activities. That's how you're all involved here very much in the different alpha, beta and gamma clusters. And I think in terms of the mix, we have achieved that perfect balance that she mentioned in her talk already, and have a really fantastic balance between girls and boys throughout the day. Now, for those who are not here in person and join us in Liverpool at CERN or in Munich, they can also participate in the day, as can you later. We have established 2 channels in order to communicate with us from wherever you are in the world. One is to tweet us, to sending your messages to the QUASAR group, where the Twitter address is shown here. Please note that the group G is a 6, the letter 6, rather than a capital G. We've also established the unique hashtag MarieCurieDay2017. So if you had anything today, any particular photographs that you liked, any experiment that you did earlier that you particularly enjoyed, tweet it to us. We would really like to see your impressions from throughout the day. So to expand a little bit from what was said before, I mean, you guys here had the pleasure of meeting Marie Curie in person already this morning, which is quite a unique treat, which you don't get very often. I think it can't be overstated how difficult the life of a researcher, of a female researcher, was back in the day when Marie looked into studying physics in the first place and then also making a career as a researcher. I mean, not only was her family background a difficult one, with her mother passed away at the age of only 10, and then really the family being in financial struggle throughout the time. But then also the fact that in her home country there was literally no possibility whatsoever to study in the subjects that she loved so much, either physics or mathematics, so that she had to go to France and be one or the first woman to complete a degree and a doctoral degree there. Also the first woman who became a professor there, and as you heard before, the first researcher who has received a Nobel Prize in 2 different disciplines. So superlatives really throughout her career. And a lot of the things that qualify outstanding researchers today as part of her life, namely breaking down barriers, showing international mobility and collaborating with the world. I think that's, in terms of her heritage that she's leaving with us, treats that really are part of modern research everywhere in the world. In terms of the Marie Sklodowska Curie Actions, I also wanted to expand a little bit more on this as compared to what you heard so far. So that's a support mechanism that supports researchers from anywhere in the world to do the best research that they would like to do. It supports researchers coming from Europe and wanting to carry out research elsewhere in the world, or researchers from any part of the world who want to carry out their research here in Europe. The only qualifying elements is that the research has to be excellent, so it's really you in a couple of years maybe who have your own research ideas that you would like to do at the very best places, and the Marie Sklodowska Curie Actions allow you to do exactly that. Within the scheme there's a whole range of different possibilities of getting funding. You can get funding, you can be supported as an individual researcher. So if you have a great idea and you would like to spend a year or 2 years at a leading research institute elsewhere in Europe, you can get your contract funded, and you can also get funding for your research. You can also establish schemes that allow staff exchange between different places. So if there's a regular collaboration between a university in Italy and a research center in France, then the Marie Sklodowska Curie Actions provide mechanisms whereby staff can move in between places. Now finally, and that's I think the strong link that we have here with the Marie Sklodowska Curie Actions, there are innovative training networks. And the program here is, I guess, is included in the name of the program. What you need to come up with is an innovative idea. You need to come up with an idea that makes training of researchers fundamentally better. And that's a challenge, and you need to really think carefully about what that includes, because it doesn't only mean looking at what you're doing, analyzing it, and simply doing it better. It also means, very similar to what Marie Curie did, breaking down barriers, building bridges to other communities, to other countries, to other sectors, to build bridges across generations in order to achieve the best possible training. And that's the fantastic thing about these ITNs, as they are typically referred to, is that you can start from a green field and you can say, that's my research area, so how do I provide the best possible training to a cohort of researchers in that area? You can choose your partners, nobody tells you who to team up with. You can define the research program yourself, you can define the training program yourself, and the only driving element is to make sure that everybody in that project receives the best possible training that there is. So my research is in accelerator science. That means we design these very large machines at places like CERN that clash atoms and look very deep into nature itself in all its facets. They are also machines that find a huge variety of society applications. You'll probably know them from the airport when you go through the security scanners and have to lift your arms, and that's an accelerator which provides these images. You will also know them from medical diagnosis, like X-ray generation, for example, where accelerators are used in order to produce that light which is used for imaging the patient. So accelerators are very much around us all of the time. And they're also a very good sector in terms of research for providing training to researchers. Why is that the case? If you look at the big facilities, probably no single country in the world could build these facilities alone. So you need international collaboration. You need the best people in the world in order to make things happen. You couldn't build a machine like the Large Hadron Collider at CERN alone, no matter what country you are. You need expertise from a variety of experts from all over the world. At the same time, you need to work between sectors. So you need 3 ingredients, I would say. You need the infrastructure of a very large international lab like CERN. So you really need the critical mass and size and also the technical skills that such a lab provides. You need the, say, craziness or academic freedom of universities in order to really push the strongest science. So you need these professors and academics that come up with ideas that maybe find an answer only in 20, 30, 40 years. And if you look back, I mean, that's exactly what happened at CERN when the prediction was made about a very heavy particle that should be there somewhere hidden, and we only needed to build that machine to discover that particle. And it took decades, it took 50 years to build that machine. Finally, the third ingredient is you need contributions from the industry sector. You can't build an accelerator of the size of the LHC, 27 kilometers in circumference, if you rely on universities and research centers alone. So you need to team up with the best companies in the world in order to mass produce the magnets, the diagnostics, the control systems, all the different components that are required to make an accelerator work. So here's why I think accelerator science, by combining different countries, different sectors, also different generations, the very experienced researchers together with the next and the next generation. They all have to team up in order to make these machines work, and also to think beyond, to think what are going to be the next machines that will support our research in the future. So a particular area of accelerator research is beam diagnostics, and that's how we here in Liverpool got involved into that whole area pretty much 10 years ago. So a beam diagnostic is a device that tells you something about a beam of charged particles. If I have a beam of charged particles, and I mean you here, you have seen that before with Chris's fantastic augmented reality app when the beam of charged particles flew over the table, and you want to diagnose that particle beam, the simplest thing that you can do is you put something in the path of that beam. That can be a foil of metal, you just put it in, pretty much like if you want to see how a laser pointer crosses the room, you have to put a piece of paper in between the laser pointer and its path to see where it ends up. It's the same principle, you put something, any type of metal into that beam. Now that sounds trivial, and it does give you an image, so you get an image of your particle beam, but in order to understand that monitor, in order to optimize the diagnostics for your particular accelerator, you need a lot more than just putting a foil into that beam. You need to understand how the beam and your foil interact. So already by talking about the beam, you need to look into electromagnetism, you need to look into how charged particles behave. If you want to understand the type of radiation that is generated, you need to look into the properties of the interaction between the beam and the metal. That will tell you about the emission spectrum of the radiation. You then get some kind of light from that interaction, and that light needs to be guided towards a camera system. To guide that light, you need optics. So in order to design the optics, to understand it, to optimize it, you need to become familiar with optical system design. And then all the way to your camera system, where again you need to understand really how is your camera working, to understand what kind of signal it shows you. It will give you some signal, but without proper analysis you will have no idea what really the information of that system includes. So a lot of things combined, and I think the message is that if you want to design even the simplest diagnostics, any type of monitor, you need to become an expert in a number of different fields, not only physics, but also engineering. You need to understand material sciences, IT systems, mathematics. So there's a lot of different skills that are required in order to optimize any accelerator. And that was the cornerstone of defining the innovative training principle that is in the project DITANET, which is a European training network that was started in 2008 with the sole aim of training experts in particle beam diagnostics. Now, part of the training concept was to do beyond state-of-the-art research, so every single fellow, every researcher that was employed within DITANET did cutting-edge research into a monitor that didn't exist before, a device that could characterize a particular particle beam better than anybody else had ever measured it before. What we also wanted to do is we wanted to have these researchers distributed across Europe. We wanted to have them in different sectors, so at universities, research centers, and in industry, and we wanted all of them to work together to push the overall boundaries of diagnostics. What we also did is we wanted them to meet on a fairly regular basis, because research is all about dialogue and discussion. So we organized a lot of international events like this school here, which took place in Ganil some years ago, and I mean you've seen many pictures of events that have taken place over the years at various places. Research is all about communication and dialogue, about critically asking whether that's really the best we can do and pushing the limits ever further. So a big part of that training concept was to make sure people interact on a regular basis and to build up an international network of contacts that help you find answers to questions where nobody at that moment in time has an answer for. Now, when DITANET came to an end, it was amazingly successful. The network had grown from initially 20 partner institutions to 40. We had initially planned to organize just 3 workshops, but we ended up organizing more than 10, and it became bigger and bigger. So the question at the time was, what's coming next? Now, innovative training networks means it's only an innovation when you do it the first time. So you couldn't go back to Brussels and say, now we want DITANET 2. So what we did at the time is we asked the community, so what's the big challenge? What comes after you've done the prototyping of these monitors for the most demanding particle beams? And then the response from the research community or the communities was immense, and we received a lot of input from various sectors. Actually, it was overwhelming. It was much more than any training network could have ever covered. But there were two big schemes that emerged from that discussion. The first one was that radio frequency accelerators, the classical accelerator technology, had a lot of overlap with the laser community, which uses light also in cavities. And lasers and accelerators, they had an existence in parallel with very, very limited overlap between those communities. So in a project that was proposed afterwards, LA-CubeNet, we brought the two communities together. We joined the accelerator experts and the laser experts in order to push the generation, the acceleration, and the diagnostics of particle beams all in just one comprehensive training network. And those of you who are here, you've met that lady beforehand who presented her work in form of a poster. So Alex was one of our 19 fellows within LA-CubeNet, and she developed beyond state-of-the-art diagnostics using laser technology. I mentioned laser acceleration, and that's just one other example. I said before that the sheer size of the Large Hadron Collider, 27 kilometers of circumference, is enormous, and scientists are trying very hard to reduce the size and complexity of these devices very significantly. So here is an illustration of how a system might look like that can shrink an accelerator by the factor of 1,000. So where the LHC is today 27 kilometers in circumference, that technology would allow it basically to reduce it to 27 meters. It requires very high accelerating gradients, very high voltages that are generated in microstructures. So what you see here is laser light coming from the top and falling onto a tiny structure which has micrometer dimensions, just a fraction of the human hair. Inside of these structures, you can see, if you go from top to bottom, that the profile of the light is changed. And in the very center of the structure, you all of a sudden have a field pattern that allows you to accelerate a particle beam from left to right. So now imagine you have that structure in some sort of an optical fiber, like we use it for telecommunication, and you channel an electron beam inside of that fiber, you bring it to high energies, then you can think of something like an endoscope for electron beam treatment in a hospital in situ, so wherever the patient needs irradiation at any part of the human body. So that at the moment is a vision. It's something that may become available over the next decade, but we are already working on this now, and our fellows are, in order to achieve these technology jumps forward. Now, when we did this initial call for ideas, the laser idea was just one idea. That was one community that engaged with us and said, look, we don't think we have enough dialogue with us, so why not make an innovative training network between our communities? And it worked. At the same time, there was also a need to optimize particle accelerators in general. And at the time, there was a clause in the guide for applicants which basically said, whenever you propose an innovative training networks, you should not apply for more than 540 fellow training months. Now, 540 fellow training months means if you employ a young researcher for 36 months, you can employ 15 people over 3 years' time. Now, you should not does not mean you cannot. So we just ignored that kind of guidance, and we asked for much more. We asked for more than 800 training months, and we got it. And that was the largest ever ITN that was funded by the European Union, a project called OPAC, Optimization of Particle Accelerators. They actually changed the guide for applicants in the year after, and then said you cannot apply for more than 540 training months. So now it's a fixed limit of a maximum of 15 fellows. Anyway, in OPAC the idea was still to use beam diagnostics as the core of this project. So again, the idea of having that kind of ideal training opportunity with all the different interdisciplinary links, but then link it to other activities that are equally important to optimize particle accelerators. The first one is you need to understand how a beam behaves, how a beam of charged particle moves inside of an accelerator or a light source. So we had one work package with 7 fellows working on nothing but beam simulations. We had the second work package that I mentioned before, where our fellows continued in the spirit of the DITANET project and developed advanced diagnostics, like what's shown here, really complicated cryogenic detectors that were developed in order to measure beams at the LHC better than they were ever measured before. And finally, we needed the tools and techniques in order to do advanced simulations and control the machine better than ever before. So we had fellows dedicated for computer simulation studies. And again, a very big success. We had 23 fellows in this project, and in combination with CUBENet, we had between 2011 and 2015, 45 fellows working on the wider area of accelerator instrumentation. 2015, the question was then again, what's coming next? Because again, you couldn't just build up on your past projects, and what we did is we looked into a very specific area of research which is really a hot topic at the moment, and that is ion beam based particle therapy. We talked about this a little bit before, and you've done your own experiments during the hands-on session earlier today. So the idea here is that there's some magic that's happening when an ion beam enters the human body, and that is that at the beginning, when the ion beam goes into your body, pretty much nothing happens. And then at some point, which is a function of the beam energy only, the ion beam deposits all of its energy in pretty much a very narrow region of space. So that means you can penetrate a patient's body, and if you know where the cancer is located inside the body, you can target that cancer cell, shoot the ion beam onto the target, and kill the cancer without affecting the healthy tissue. It's an absolute game changer for some cancer types, and is a huge step forward. At the moment in the UK, if you need that kind of treatment, you need to go abroad, you need to go to one of the centers that are in the Czech Republic, Italy or Germany, but you can't get the treatment here in the country at the moment. Now the good news is that there is heavy investment into the area, and there will be several centers built now, and OMA, the Optimization of Medical Accelerators project, aims at improving and optimizing that treatment modality altogether. So we are looking into making ion beam treatment available to many more patients, understanding the method even better, and optimizing the way that the beam is provided to the patient. This here is one example of how these facilities look like. So as a patient, you would be based on that fully movable table in all the dimensions, and then the ion beam would come into your body in 10 or 20 sessions, and the cancer, if it's a well-located tumor, can be killed inside the body of the patient. So very much an applied science and a contrast to what we've done before, and that activity started in 2015, and again we are training now 15 fellows in that area. But there's more. We've gone back to the area of fundamental science. We've asked the question of why nature behaves the way it behaves. We have asked the question of why is there a matter-antimatter asymmetry in the universe in particular. And one way of looking into that question is by using very low energy beams of antimatter particles. And that led to the creation of a project called AVA, named after a little girl, Accelerators Validating Antimatter Physics. What's shown here and what looks like a fancy diagram is actually a lot of physics in the symbol of that project. If I change that against the actual measurement, you can see that it's a process where an antiproton, which is shown on the left-hand side of the screen, it's a P with the bar on top, is generated in a reaction, and that has led to us using that as a symbol for our network. So at the moment there's only one place on Earth where you can do measurements and experiments with low energy antiparticles, and that's at CERN in Geneva. And for 20 years that facility has been running, and it has produced fantastic scientific results, but they have always struggled with one thing, in that these antiparticles, they were created at high energies, and then it was incredibly difficult to do precision studies with these hot particles because they were too high in energy. So only this year there's a new facility which is being commissioned at the moment called ELENA, an extra low energy storage ring for antiprotons at CERN, which reduces the velocity of these particles even further down to energies where they are essentially at rest. And that will now give us access to really at the very fundamental level do precision studies into where are matter and antimatter particles different and how do the two compare, and really allow us to push the boundaries in knowledge by using antimatter beams. What we've also done with these innovative training networks, we've always had a dialogue with the fellows, the researchers, the wider community. And when we saw that things are working, that we've done differently than anybody else, we went out and we talked about it. So we went to conferences all around the world and we presented the research results of our fellows. We helped them find their next jobs. We created an international contact network around them, and we talked about the community needs. So what is the next project that's going to come up afterwards? So international communication, again, key to really making research successful. What we've also done is we have looked into commercialization of research. So just to continue the stories that I've started before, you saw Alex on the previous picture when she was developing that laser sensor at the very start of her fellowship, and that was now 6 years ago. And since then, there has been a tremendous development in terms of laser sensors. And just last year, she has founded her own company. So now looking also into technology transfer and into commercialization of research. So you can see that this is a story which really continues over the years, building up one by one on the training concepts and the successes of past activities. Now, that picture here, which looks like a plasma ball, that's actually fellows within our ITNs over the years. You can see all these little faces in there. So each single one of them is a fellow that was trained by innovative training networks coordinated from us here in Liverpool. And they have achieved amazing things. They went on to do amazing things. Some of them went to the academic sector, some went to industry, others are now staff at national and international labs. And I think that's really a theme which has continued throughout all these years. The Marie Sklodowska Curie Actions in general have been an enormous success story for the European Union. They have trained, as you've heard before, more than 100,000 researchers over the last 20 years. And these are researchers at every career stage, from PhD students to postdocs to very experienced researchers. Amongst the Marie Curie Fellows are today 8 Nobel laureates and also an Oscar Academy Award winner. We do go out a lot and talk about the nice work with our fellows. We really like working with them, and we like to see how they develop over the course of an ITN. This picture here shows me talking to a few hundreds of coordinators of projects in Brussels, sharing best practice across the European Union. Last week I went to London to share the practice that we have here in Liverpool with people who are considering applying for the next ITN and training the next generation of researchers to make sure that the many things that we have learned over the years really get communicated to those coordinators and that they can benefit from our experience as well. Now, in terms of Marie Sklodowska Curie Actions benefiting you, I think I've touched on that at the very beginning. So it's a support mechanism for any type of researcher and also any sector, whether you in the future end up doing biology, like some of you mentioned before, or astrophysics or chemistry, whether you end up in the academic sector or in industry. The Marie Curie Actions are a support mechanism that can really boost your career and also your research experiences at any career stage. So make sure you stay in touch with this and make maximum benefit of those. Otherwise, I would say let's continue the celebration, have a fantastic day today, and remember both Marie Curie and the Marie Curie Actions in the best possible way. Thank you.